Okay, so we're going to do some Maya. So like I said in class, we're going to start off with the real basics at first. And one of the basics is making sure that our file structure is set up properly. So um, within the world of 3D, within the world of anything particularly technical, you are often dependent on the way you set up your files. You can't just be setting saves to desktops and random images to different places. And then when you move stuff around to clean up or maybe even send to someone, to expect all those dependencies to travel with it. You need to have everything in a very organized place. Now this is all done for us in Maya. You just got to tell it to do it. So the very beginning, what have we got? Okay, so we've opened up Maya. We've got this page. Like I said, the more you do, the more you'll have these like recent file things open. But all we're gonna do is click new because we're making up a new scene. There you go, new Maya. I'm just going to change my background to something better. There you go. So number one, I'm going to set up what we call a project folder. Something where I can save all my textures, I can save all my UVs, I can save all my renders, my actual working files, all that kind of stuff. We're going to save it to an actual folder structure, so we can take that folder anywhere, and that one folder contains all our dependencies. And it's very, very easy to do. All I'm going to do is come up to the file, and then come down to where it says project down here. Now, you've got project window and then you've got set project. This is bad terminology, I think, for them, because project window set project makes you think that, oh, that's what I click to actually make my project. That's not. Set project redirects Maya back to a pre-existing project. But project window is what we want. So I click project window and then I get this. So this is basically saying, what do I want to call my project? Where do I want to save it, and these are all the files or the folders that are going to be contained within it. Now we don't need to save to change any of these at all. We can leave these as it is. But this up here, it says current project. This is what I'm going to save, and then I'm also going to save my location to somewhere else. So current project, I'm going to click new. That allows me to actually name my project, and I'm just going to call this cube practice. There you go. And then I'm going to save my destination. Well, this is actually saved where I want it to save, but normally Maya saves it to a really horrible folder in the documents folders, and you have to drill down into it, and it's horrible. So I'm going to save this to my folder on the desktop. Like that. So I'm just going to save it somewhere nice. So then when I'm done with my project, I can put this on the OneDrive as a complete project folder, and then when I come to work on it again, I can drag it off OneDrive and work on the complete project folder. Easy, easy, easy. So with all that done, I've named my project, I've given it a destination, I'm going to click accept. So nothing like explodes and goes like, hey, we've done this thing. It just basically happens. Now just to make sure that, just to double check that that's actually happened, I'm going to go to File, again, down to Set Project. So remember, we've made our project through Project Window. Set Project is basically we want to redirect Maya back to a pre-existing project. And all I'm going to do here is just make sure that it's actually saving to the right place. So I'm going to say yes, save to Cube Practice, just set that, and we should all be good. Okay. Now I'm going to do some cube practice. I'm going to make 2 or 3 simple cube assets, using some very, very simple tools. One of our big, some of our big 5 tools. Now, number one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a very, very simple wooden crate. Something you see all over the place. You see it in most games that are kind of, set in certain eras. It's a very, very simple wooden crate. Now, what is the basic shape of a wooden crate? We're looking at a cube, aren't we? So, what I'm going to do is first of all think about, I'm making a wooden crate. The overall shape is a cube. Therefore, my first initial shape should be a cube. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm either going to go to Create, and then Polygon Primitives, and then Cube, or I'm going to click on the cube in the modeling shelf here. I'm going to click Cube, and then I'm going to hold Shift, and then drag out a nice big cube at the beginning. Like that. Perfect. Now remember, we're just going to recover how we actually move stuff around. So how do I navigate? How do I move my camera around? It's all based off Alt. So I'm holding my Alt key. Left mouse is tumble or rotate. Middle mouse is pan. And right mouse is zoom. So I'm holding the Alt key while I do this, and then I hold left mouse middle mouse, right mouse. That's very, very good. Cool. So now I've got my base object. Now, admittedly, there are some games where we're actually done with the modeling because that's all you might need, but I actually want some proper physical shapes here. I want the indentations, I want the frames on the outside, little indentations at top and side and bottom, that kind of stuff. I want all that. And like I said, I'm going to keep it really, really simple at first, just learning the tools. So first of all, what I want to do is select all the faces of the entire object, because I'm going to extrude all of them to create the shapes that I want. So how do I select something in face mode? Well, hovering over my object, I hold right click, then I got my context menu, and again you can ignore this big black box underneath it, this big grey box should I say, and all I want to do is select from up this top ring up here the relevant function. So I want a face selection, so I'm going to go to face mode like that, and I can either go around and shift click all the different faces manually, or I can drag a box over the entire thing if I want to select all the faces like that. So now all the faces are selected. Remember, holding on right click, going to face, and then just dragging a box over the entire thing to select all the faces, which is good. Cool. Now we're going to create all 6 sides of this cube, of this crate, at the same time. It's super, super easy. What we're going to use, well, okay, what is the theory of what I want to do? Well, I want to make a frame, first of all, going around the outside, and then I'm going to make an indentation so it goes in. How do I do that? It's very, very simple. So with everything selected, I'm going to go to extrude, which is, again, this tool up here, the little tower with a white base. Click that, and I'm going to get this little menu up here. So by default, it's not actually going to do what I want it to do. It's not going to work quite right. But what I'm going to do is where it says keep faces together, just at the bottom, this little menu, I'm just going to click that and then move it to the left until it says off. And now what it means is every one of these faces is going to act on its own. It's not going to be done as one big shape. So now when I do an offset, each one of the faces moves individually, as you can see. So, which is very, very good. So what I'm going to do first of all is just decide how thick I want the frames of the box going around. How thick do I want those? I'm thinking this is going to be, I don't know, like waist high. It's going to be a relatively big box, but it's not going to be like a giant box. So around there, I'm quite comfortable with that. So that already has created our first bit of detail where I turn that off, where I'm actually dictating the shape of 1, the frames going around, but 2, the size and shape of the indentation in the middle. And next I'm going to make that indentation. Do I just grab thickness and pull that down? No, because as you can see, it doesn't actually give us the right shape. It just kind of pulls those faces inwards and gives us kind of like a sharp edge like this. Remember, every time you make a new block of geometry, a new kind of extrusion, you have to hit extrusion. So I'm going to hit extrusion, and then I'm going to use thickness just to pull that in. Now I don't want to pull it in too far because we might get this. This is literally because all these other faces are coming so far in that they start overlapping each other. So I'm just going to pull it up. And I'm going to make this, relatively realistic. So I'm going to bring this down to about there, How thick is this 2x4 that's being used for the frame? If it's waist high, it's not going to be particularly thin or particularly thick. It's going to be, how I would imagine a 2x4 to be. And there we go. Really simple. What we've got there is a perfectly usable piece of geometry for a lot of different games. You've got games with crates, you've got games with all sorts of things. You've got, Half-Life used crates to no end back in the day. So already we've made a piece of geometry, and we're going to do that again. So we're going to do it. So we hit crate by just making a cube first of all. So with that cube, I'm then going to grab all the faces, hit extrude once. Now this first extrusion, we turn off faces, and then just bring it in to dictate that thickness of that frame. And then the second one, second extrusion, we're using that to pull down a little bit to then dictate the indentation. So in the real world, obviously, this would be either one big plank of compacted wood, or it'd be multiple different strips. If I'm keeping it very, very simple, multiple different strips. You might have some sort of graphic design on this side, maybe a hole drilled in here. We've got all these different faces to play with, and we're done. Like I said, very, very easy. So let's just drill down a little bit more into what the tools we're actually using there were. So again, I'll make a cube, and I'm just going to use that extrusion tool again. So extrude right there. So I'm just extruding this one face. If I click extrude, I just play around with some of these tools. If I just use thickness, that's going to push and pull up and pull down that geometry. Now this is one thing we want to avoid, where it's shimmering, kind of like black and grey shimmering. That's because the faces are so close together, they're literally on top of each other. This is called Z fighting. Whenever you see this kind of like fizzy texture fighting each other, it's called Z fighting. And then you've got offset. Now offset brings it in or outwards, depending on what you want to do. Now obviously, if you're really being pedantic with the shape and the construction of these wooden crates, you'd say, well, yeah, the plank goes from over here to over here. They don't necessarily come in this kind of like 45 degree angle cut here. That's fine. This is just a skeleton of the mesh. That's all it is. It's not actually the physical texture shape. It's just a skeleton that we can texture later on. So I'll bring this in. I can dictate any kind of shape or whatever that I want. And if I was just to, again, not click off this menu at all, I'm just going to leave it as is, and I start to play with the thickness, notice I'm not actually bringing up a new bit of geometry. I'm just moving this current bit of selected geometry up and down, which gives us these kind of not pyramid shapes, rhombus shapes. Sometimes that might be what you want, but in this case, it's not what I want. So I would have to do an extrusion again, because what I want to do is create a new bit of geometry which pushes downwards. So I'm going to click extrude. I'm going to push that downwards like that. And then I could keep going like that forever. I could keep just I can do some really cool stuff with this if I wanted to. Yeah. So all I've done there is made this kind of shape. This could be something. Just using extrude. Very, very simple. As you can see, the extrusion tool is a very, very, very powerful tool, and it's really quick to make simple assets like this, which is what we're going to make. So I'll do the whole process again. I'm going to make a crate. That's my job for this game, is I make all the wooden crates. So I'm going to make a cube, because my base crate is a cube. And then because I know all the different faces are going to be identical, they're all going to be the same shape, nothing's going to be different, I'm just going to select the entire thing in one go. Extrude. Make sure I've got keep faces turned off. Keep faces together turned off. And then I'm going to offset first to bring in that frame, like I said. And then I'm going to use offset extrusion again to then use a thickness to just bring it in a bit. Dead easy. Super, super quick. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to keep this in the same scene, but what I'm going to do next is use pretty much the same idea, but I'm going to use a new tool. I'm going to use the bevel to create something a bit more visually complex, whereas this is pretty much identical from face to face. All 6 sides are perfectly identical. This is going to have a little more asymmetricality. It's going to be a little bit more directional, but it's just going to be just as simple. So, like we spoke about in class, very, very simple shapes like this. So this is just a disposable vape pen, and it's very simple. It's a super, super cool, simple shape. But something like this you might find in games like Starfield. You might find in games like Alien Isolation. Like hypo sprays, more of a sci-fi kind of design. We did speak about in class that the more modern you go, the more things become more simpler because of industrialization and stuff. If you go back 2,000 years, for instance, everything was very unique. Everything was very obviously handmade, and often wobbly and not very refined and not very kind of straight. But obviously nowadays you're able to kind of make these very, very rapidly reproduced, consistent kind of shape objects. So an object like this is very, very simple to make, but again, it's also something that as a 3D artist you might be making as part of your job quite a lot. And it's very, very simple to actually see what's going on. I mean, we can see here just from a simple image, it's a tall cube which has got some bevels on the outside and something going on the inside. So we're going to show how I'm going to show you how we make this, but also set up for texturing, because as we can see, there's got a difference in material type here. We've got a plastic top, a plastic bottom, and then kind of like a metal body. So right here we've got different roughness values. So we've got very, very shiny here. So this will be quite a dark roughness value because it's very shiny. Same with the bottom, very shiny. In here in the middle, it's going to be relatively high in the roughness value because it's rougher, so it's going to be lighter. But then you've got plastic, and you've got plastic at the bottom. Now on the metalness value, these are going to be 0 because they're not metal whatsoever. But then this metal in the middle, the main body of it, will be higher. It'll be a lighter metallic color or metallic value because it's not quite chrome, but it's, you know, it's getting up there a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to set up geometry, which is going to separate these sections off. So when I'm texturing, I can make clean divisions between shiny, roughness, shiny, and also plastic, metal, plastic, and also black, color, black. Okay, so how do we make this? Well, what's this first shape we're looking at? It's a cube. This simple geometry is a cube. So I'm going to make a cube, number 1. Now obviously we're dealing with something which isn't a square. This is a cuboid shape, so it's taller than it is wider. So now that I've made that, I've now got to make it the height. So I've made the base shape. Now I'm going to make the height. So how do I do that? Very, very simple. I'm just going to go to face mode. So remember, holding right click, go to face mode. I'm going to grab the very top. Press W for my movement tool. So W for my movement tool. And then I'm just going to, oops, daisy, I'm going to turn something off. I've got old options turned on from a past project. And then I'm just going to pull that up. So I'm going to do, so again, in face mode, hold right click, go to face mode, select the face I want to move, which is the top face, and then press W for my movement tool. And then I'm just going to move it up. And here I can decide how tall I want this to be. So I'm going to use my best judgment to look at that and go, you know, is this the right kind of height? This looks pretty close to how I've moved it up there. And I'm just going to eyeball this in as well. I'm not being too precise with it. Cool. So boom, right away, I've got some nice shapes going on. So I'm happy with that. We're almost there. Just a few more functions before we're done. Next, I can either go one of two ways. I can either, one of three ways. I can either bevel the edges to create this more rounder edge here. I can extrude up to make the mouthpiece. Or I can add the divisions in to separate from plastic, metal, plastic. Now in this case, because it's such a simple object, it doesn't really matter which one I do because everything's going to work out. Now what I think I'm going to do first of all is bevel the edges to make the rounder corners. Oh, I say rounder corners, it's literally, if you look carefully at this, there's just one straight division, so it's a face here, one face here, one face here, and then the side face here. So how do we make sure that we're beveling the right stuff? I'm going to look to see, I'm not going to have any bevels up here, at least for the time being. There's obviously no bevels at the bottom. There's only bevels on the vertical edges. So I'm going to, in edge mode, because now I'm going to bevel edges. You can't bevel faces, or you shouldn't bevel faces. You should be beveling edges. So I'm going to go to edge mode in this case. So hold right click, go to edge mode. And I'm going to just click and then hold shift and then click the other faces, or other edges I should say, that I want. Like that. So I've got those 4 edges selected. I'm going to hit bevel. And bevel is this icon here. A little orange cube with a yellow, white Y in the middle. So click bevel. Boom. And now I've got another option box here. And again, you can play with these. So fraction is basically how big that bevel is. Segment says within this new bevel edge here, how many edges you're adding in. Depth is a really cool one because you can actually make it inverted, flat, or embossed. Now these bottom three you can ignore. These are stuff that in this setup don't actually do anything. So what I got to do now is decide if I'm going to be able to match this or not. So I'm going to get there. So the great thing about these boxes as well is if 0.3 is too small but 0.4 is too big, I can put 3.5, 0.3.5 in here, 0.35. So I can actually manually input these numbers if I want to get like really precise measurements. I've got all the control I can have. And then I'm going to again look at my reference, and this isn't a super smooth corner like this. This is a very, very simple one segment corner like this. And I remember saying in class that when it comes to beveling and adding these segments, you don't always need to have a million segments in something. Sometimes something as simple as just a one segment like this will communicate a curve to the audience, especially on smaller objects. It's only a giant object where you need to kind of like max out the segments. Okay, so there, what I've got is something looking good. You know, I've got the right feel. I'm looking at my reference, I'm looking at this is all looking good. I'm happy with that. Cool. So number one, I've got my bevel in there. I've dictated the shape of this. Now what am I going to do? Well, I can either make the extrusion at the top for the mouthpiece, or I can make the separation between plastic, metal, plastic, like I was saying before. I think I'm going to add the division between metal, plastic, metal. So what I'm talking about here is actually adding physical geometry in there, or adding separations, adding edges, which will give me a small thin face at the top, or small thin ringer face at the top here, which will separate between metal and plastic. And then this whole middle bit here will be metal, and then I'll have basically the same thickness down here for my plastic section at the bottom. Now again, very simple to do, but obviously if you've never used Maya before, you don't know. So I'm just going to press Q just to go back into object mode. So I'm basically getting out of bevel mode, pressing Q, and just making sure that I'm still in edge mode, so I can select edges. And I'm either going to manually go through and select all these different edges, or just make sure I select all the middle edges. I don't want the top and I don't want the bottom. I don't want any of that. I just want these vertical edges going around the middle. That's all I want. And then I'm going to add edges. So how do you add edges? There is a number of different ways you can add them, but how we're going to add them is by going up to Mesh Tools and then Connect. Now annoyingly, there are about 3 different tools called Connect. The one that we want is in Mesh Tools. And why do we want that? Well, the great thing about this particular version of the tool is that it'll give you a preview of where the cut's going to be. So this isn't actually cut the geometry yet. It's just basically saying I'm going to cut here. And if I go up to the top right hand side of the screen, you've got this little hammer with 3 dots. That's the tool settings menu. And if you click that, it'll open up a tool setting. In fact, I'll move this out of the way for now. It'll open up a tool setting window here. And another really, really cool thing about Maya is once you're in a tool, you've got it selected. If you just middle mouse drag in the scene, you can affect that tool. So in this case, we've got segments. So if I hold down my middle mouse and drag left and right, I can increase and decrease the amount of segments. If I click slide and then do the same thing, so hold middle mouse, drag left, drag right, I can move this segment up and down the length of the selection. And then if I hit pinch and do the same thing, we basically push and pull these things together. So I can see what I'm going to do, hopefully. I'm going to make sure that I've got 2 segments, because then this top section here is going to be the top plastic section. The bottom bit here is going to be the bottom plastic section, and then this middle bit is going to be the actual metal chassis, which is good. And then I'm going to just use pinch just to start to push these away from each other. And what's happening here is they're pushing equally away from each other. If I don't hit slide anyway, they're pushing equally away from each other. So the distance at the very top and the distance at the very bottom should be the same. So I'm just going to push these out, and I'm just going to eyeball in again, like what would be from the top of this rim here to where they meet here, what would be that distance. So I'm going to kind of eyeball that in, not being too precious. I'm going to do something like that. Cool. So what it's doing there is it's giving me a preview of where these edges are going to be. And if I'm happy with that, I'm just going to press W to basically confirm that. And now you can see that I've got an edge at the top here, wrapping around, and I've got an edge at the bottom, wrapping around. So that gives me a number of different things. It gives me this physical separation between different material types, which is going to be very useful for texturing because it means that I can separate these things off away from each other. I can say, right, this is going to be plastic, therefore that UV isn't going to touch it. This is going to be metal, therefore this UV isn't going to touch anything. And the very, very bottom I've got plastic, so this is going to touch anything. But then it also gives you just structural shape as well. So if I was doing something a bit more elaborate with the middle bit here, but I'm still keeping the top and bottom plastic sections, these shapes are very, very simple. It means that I'm not accidentally going to be sending vertexes or adjusting the shapes up here. It gives me some structure. It also gives me a bit of a guideline to texture along if I was to keep everything as one shape. Pardon me. Right, okay, so now we've added the edges in at the very top and the very bottom. So we've done 2 of the 3 functions to get the basic shape in there, which is super, super good. Now there is one thing that has happened in 2 places on this object, which I did say in class is something that we shouldn't have at the end of a project, or the end of a model, is n-gons. Remember, you've got tris, which is 1, 2, 3 vertexes, making up a polygon. You've got quads, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 vertexes making up a polygon. But an n-gon is more than 4, so 5 plus makes up an n-gon. Now up here, we've got 8, oh no, more than that, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 12 edges up here making up this face. So this right here is a super n-gon. And the same things happen at the bottom there. But also remember what I was saying about you can make these objects, you can make these shapes as long as you fix them. That's what I'm going to do now. So we've got the general shape in there, we've got the division between plastic, metal, plastic. Now it's time to make this mouthpiece out of the top. This is going to be very simple. All we're going to do is just pay attention to what's happening here as a shape. So we're going to be going back to our art fundamental classes and we're observing things, we're looking at stuff, and I'm looking at the shapes here. So we've got obviously the top rim here, but then we come in and up a little bit to make this mouthpiece section. So we're coming in, not as much obviously on the sides, but definitely on this broad side here we come in quite a bit, and then we also lift up a little bit. So let's do that. So I'm going to extrude, and in this case I'm actually going to not use any of these tools. I'm just going to use a normal scaling tool. So I've clicked extrude, so the extrusion's been done, but I'm just going to click R for my scale tool, and I'm going to manually do this myself. So now all the extrusion stuff, all the scaling offsetting has been done by me. So I'm going to first extrude this in to make the depth here. How wide do I want the footprint of that mouthpiece to be? And then I'm going to bring it in a little bit to the side. So I only bring it in a tiny bit, like that. And then I'll also lift it up. So as you can see, there is a bit of a angle to this, so I also lift it up. So I'm just pressing W there for my movement tool. I'm lifting it up, and then I can make adjustments. And all I'm doing is trying to imagine, if I've not physically got the thing in my hand, I'm trying to imagine the thickness of the bottom of this mouthpiece. Now luckily I've got one next to me here so I can actually have a look at it, and it is quite thin actually. Just like that. I'm happy with that. And now what we're going to do is actually make the mouthpiece top. Now yes, there is a bit of a curve here at the very, very top, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. At first we want to get the basic shapes. Just like in 2D, just like in Art Fundamentals and within Visual Design, we're not going for the detail straight away. We go for the big shapes. What was the first big shape we made? It was a cube to dictate the general primitive. And then from there it was the height. And then from there we dictated the slight bevel. And now we're up to doing this. So now I'm going to have to make the mouthpiece itself, and again just another extrusion. So I've done one extrusion inwards to make this shape, and also before I extruded it again, I just physically pulled it up using the move tool to get this slight kind of rise, and then I'm going to extrude again and pull this up manually. So I can rely on these if I want to. I can absolutely rely on these, or I can rely on these. Depending on what's happening with it, depends on what you do. Sometimes it's just comfortability. Do you want to use one over the other? So I'm just going to bring this up again, looking at how high this comes up compared to the rest of the object. Maybe it needs to come down a little bit. I'm going to bring it in a little bit, and I'm going to bring it in a little bit, just like that. So what tools have we used so far to make this shape? We've used, obviously, creating a primitive. We've used extrusion. We've just used extrusion then. We've used bevel, and we've used connect to add the edges in there. So 3 very, very simple shapes, or simple tools, to create a simple shape, but a very strong, powerful shape. Something like this is a perfect shape for like a sci-fi game. Maybe it's some sort of hyper spray health pack thing. Maybe it's, if you're doing like Cyberpunk 2077 or something, maybe it's, one of the cartel drug things, whatever it is. You often get these kind of shapes in sci-fi games. Right there, we've got a very, very simple shape, but a very, very, almost done. You could call this done, obviously after fixing the n-gons at the top and the bottom, you could call this done. You could absolutely call this done. But what we're going to do now is take it a little bit further. We're going to add an actual mouthpiece. We're going to round off some of the edges, so to get away from all of this overly sharp stuff. And then we're also going to add some details that you wouldn't necessarily think about on an object like this, because we're looking at it from the top generally like this. So let's make the little hole here. So all I'm going to do there, again, extrusions. It's all just extrusion. Oops, a daisy. There you go, I have a little thing then. So taking this top face here, I'm going to extrude it, and then we're going to use these tools here just to offset it inwards, and actually just scale it in a little bit. All we want to do is basically just make a small little mouthpiece for this section. Something like that. And then just to kind of slightly round it off, I'm just going to take this top edge here, this top edge here, and just scale it in a little bit. And then this side edge here and this side edge here, just to scale those in a little bit. It's a little bit rounder now. You could also go the vertexes and then do the same thing, just round them off. All I'm doing there is just selecting particular vertexes. So you can see if I want this to be round, obviously it's going to be square in the corners. So if I select those corner pieces and then just use a scale tool just to bring them in a tiny bit, it rounds them out a little bit. And then I'm just going to grab that face in the middle. I'm going to extrude it down a little bit. Offset in a tiny bit. And here's a really cool trick just to seal off this area, because I don't need it to be to go any deeper than that. All I'm going to do is hit extrude again, and then I'm going to hit this. So I've made this new ring of faces, but then if I hit this orange circle or merge to center, it's going to turn everything into like a little group of triangles at the bottom. So that closes off and fixes an n-gon. This is really nice. Cool. So as you can see, that's really, really nice. There's no more n-gons at the top there, which is great. But let's take away some of this sharpness. As you can see, this edge right here is just a little sharp. So how do we get away from that sharpness and make it just a little bit softer? Bevel. There's no fancy tools. We just want to give the impression of a soft angle change here. So I'm just going to hit bevel and use a fraction just to bring it in, like that. Again, what I'm going to do here is not add any segments. There's no point. The difference between this and this for the sides of object we're dealing with is nothing. So boom, sleeve like that. Dead nice. And there's things now that I could or will be kind of fixing up. I'm not going to bother doing this bit in this particular video. I'll keep it nice and simple, but I am going to just soften off some more edges. As you can see here, there's a little bit of a softer edge here, if you can see that. One thing that I often try and think about is the size of the object and the sharpness of the edge. If this is a hero object which is going to be in front of the camera a lot, then I don't want to have any kind of like nasty edges which are going to look very fake. So what I'm going to do is just grab this edge right here, which is the very top here, and I'm just going to do a small bevel like that. maybe even a bit smaller than that. So you can see I'm at 0.2, so I'm going to put 0.15. Just slightly soften that off there. That's enough just to make it a little bit softer. And the same for the very top and the inside here. I'm just going to do the same bevel, and I'm actually going to do both of these at the same time. So I'm just going to double click that edge to select all the way around it. Shift double click that edge to select all the way around that one. Bevel. And I'm going to version 2, 3. Yeah, like that. Maybe 0.5 was the right one for that actually. Yeah. There you go. So it just means it softens up a little bit. We lose those really hard edges. It softens up a little bit. Yes, you can see a lot of hard edges on this at the minute, but that's part of the modeling process. We've not actually finalized the model just yet. So some of these sharper edges or softer edges that appear that look a bit nasty, that's just part of the actual process. Okay, so we've made that. That's looking much better now. But the last thing is the very bottom. So obviously we want to, 1, fix this massive end gun. That's a given. But 2, if you are familiar with this kind of stuff, or if you just want to kind of add a little bit of flavor and interest to the object, just look at things around you. Look at a bowl. Look at the bottom of a bowl. Look at the bottom of a tin can, of a pop can, anything like that. It's not just a flat surface. There's a lip, then it goes in, then it goes up. So what I'm going to do is create something similar. Maybe this is where, if this is a reusable thing, maybe they put a charge in the bottom and then take it and then, get rid of the charge later on. So what I'm going to do is just extrude. I'm going to offset this in a little bit, just like we did with the crate over here. So I'm going to extrude that in a little bit to make a frame. Then I'm going to extrude it up again, just to make the inside, and maybe just bring it in a bit. And in this case, I'm just going to extrude and close it like that, just like I did on the inside here. And that geometrically is the object finished. You could use that for a game very easily. Yes, there are things that I would like to do, is like, round off these edges. Now, stuff like this is getting into the intermediate level of modeling, because everything's kind of coming up vertically in one axis, is the way I look at it. But then to get this curve in this part here is just a little bit tricky. For if you've never modeled before, one thing I would usually do is actually build that shape separately. I wouldn't be beveling it or anything like that. But for now, I'm going to leave this the way it is. Now, I am going to do one last thing for this object, and because this one doesn't really need it, this is just 90 degrees. Every angle in this entire thing is 90 degrees. So you would expect light to break over an edge very sharp, like that. That makes complete sense. But over an object like this, where you've got different angles, different shapes, different whatevers, there's things we can do to make it look a little bit nicer. Currently, it looks good, but it doesn't look super good. So what I'm going to do is actually make some of this look a little bit softer and make some of it look a little bit sharper. Very easy to do. What I'm going to do is change the way we display the mesh. And I'm going to come up to mesh display up at the top here. And then come down to soften edge. Now what soften edge does is it doesn't soften it like this, where it doesn't physically soften the object like that. It'll soften the normals. So all the geometry will stay exactly where it is, but it's going to soften these edges so you don't get that harsh line there. So mesh display, soften edge. So now you can see nice and soft. This, even though it's one face, looks like a bit more of a curve. Here, looks like a bit more of a curve. And then what we can do is go around and sharpen the edges that we want to be sharp. And some of them might not necessarily look like they're doing anything. Some of them might actually make quite a big change. So what I'm going to do, for instance, is I could go into the inside here. Not that I would, because this is obviously going to turn into black, but hypothetically, I could come into the inside here. I could come up to mesh display again. And just above soften edge, you've got harden edge, which will sharpen the normals. Again, it's not going to add geometry. It's just going to sharpen the normals like that. Now I'm going to sharpen this edge right here, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. So again, select this edge going around, because this is a separation between plastic, metal, and then plastic. So that was not going to make much of a difference. Nope. And the same one at the bottom is not going to make much of a difference at all. There you go. So no, it don't make much of a difference. But then we can come to the bottom and do the same thing. So maybe I don't want to bevel this edge at the bottom, or maybe I do. I'll just quickly bevel this one like that, and I'm going to quickly just soften this edge like that. Yeah. But maybe I want the inside to be a bit sharper. So this edge here and this edge here, I want to be sharp, so I can harden edge those. So you can see how that goes from something very soft there, where you're losing all that shape on the inside. This looks more like a soft curve with a weird kind of triangle shape in the middle, to something far more kind of rigid, which is nice. Now what we can do here is also just look at the reference and think, okay, you can see there where the sharper breaks on some of these corners. So let's give that a try. Let's give that a try. And there are some areas where it'll be more present or more kind of prominent. These kind of sharp edges on a plastic like this at the top aren't going to be very noticeable. But on a metal piece it will be. So what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to do a bit of experimentation, is just harden these vertical edges in the middle where the metal of the body would be. So again, mesh display, harden edge. Nice. Okay, you can see there how they've hardened. And we're not changing the geometry or anything, but you can see the separation between the same edges, but some have been hardened and some haven't been hardened, which is super nice. So again, very, very, very simple process. All we're doing there is using extrusion, obviously to make the top mouthpiece, the inset here, and also the bottom bit here, as well as using bevel to give us a little breakdown in the corners here, and then just adding edges in there so that we can have that separation. As you can see, I've actually used that separation to say, right, the plastic bit is going to look a little bit softer, because plastic can not really get that sharp. But metal can get a little bit sharp. Metal holds its form a bit more. Right there, so that's good. That's two objects made very, very quickly. And both of these, obviously, you can smash out once you know what you're doing. You can smash out really fast. You know, this took me seconds to do. This one would probably take me about 2 minutes to do at speed and anger. Okay, so let's do one last cube-based object using extrusion, using adding edges, using bevel, and maybe a couple more. But let's just step up in complexity a little bit, because so far these are going to be very simple. These have been very simple. This one, super, super simple. It's just a straight up symmetrical cube. Every face is identical. This one, it's asymmetrical in the y-axis, but it's pretty much identical going around. Next, we're going to make another crate, but we're going to make another kind of sci-fi crate, something sci-fi, but we're going to be a bit more interesting with it. And this is, when I say sci-fi, so it's not going to be too kind of wacky out there. It's just going to be a bit of a different crate. And I'm not going to work off a reference here, so I'm going to get rid of you. I'm going to work off my own kind of brain for this one. Normally, working off reference is what we need to do, but for this case, I'm just going to build it as I go, because I actually know this kind of crate, what it looks like anyway. So I'm going to make a cube, because that's my base object. This case, in this time, what I'm going to do is, before I build anything, I'm going to change a couple of settings. So in my channel box here, which is the little stack of 3 papers here, or channel box on the right hand side here, I'm going to make sure that in the X and the Z axis it's actually in the middle of the world, because I've not done that with any of these. But seeing as we're stepping up in complexity a little bit, I'm going to do the same thing with this. So I'm going to translate X, I'm going to set that to 0, translate Z, set that to 0. So now it's in the middle of the world. Obviously I'm not going to touch my Y, because that's going to put it through the floor. Okay. So now let's think about the shape that I want. Obviously I don't want it to be a simple square shape. I could do this with a simple square shape, but I'm going to make it a bit more kind of interesting now. So I'm going to make it a bit wider, like that, and I'm going to make it a bit deeper like that. So that's the basic shape that I want. Again, thinking back to our art fundamentals, thinking about how to like bounding boxes around stuff, what's the general shape of stuff. That's what I want. So I'm going to make a flight case, to call it, something that would be put in a transport, something that you'd put your luggage into, something that it's not going to have any sharp corners on it. It's going to be protected. It's going to be something that you might transport something valuable in, or something that might transport equipment in. So I'm going to make something like that. So again, like I said, I know what these things look like naturally, because I've built them so much. So I know that I first of all look at my object. You know, if I squint my eyes and look at this reference, I squint my eyes and look at these in one of these in real life. What's the basic shape I'm seeing? It's a cuboid shape. As I start to open my eyes, what do I start seeing? Well, then I start seeing the rounded edges of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bevel. I'm going to do a big bevel over everything first of all, and you'll see why I'm not beveling edges individually, because if I just bevel this edge, for instance, on its own, this bevels, that's fine, but then I create n-gons, other bevels aren't going to work properly. You know, I'm not creating the shape that I want, so I want all the edges to be soft at one go. So what I'm going to do is grab everything like this. I'm going to hit a bevel, and then I'm going to decide how big I want this to be. So I'm going to add 2 segments in there. I'm just going to decide how protective, how curved these corners are going to be. So I'm going to do something like that, for instance. And depending on how physically big this is in the game, I might only need like 1 segment. Also, depending on the game, if you're doing a game which is like an isometric game like this, you only need 1 segment. There's no point putting loads of segments in. But if I'm doing this for something like Starfield, I might end up putting something like 3 segments in. Or 4 segments, I should say. So yeah, I think I'm going to put it 4 segments, and I think I'm going to just... something like that. Something very, very basic. So it's got rounder corners. I'm getting away from that sharp right angle. That's good. Now next what I'm going to do is create some, I don't know what you call it, a ribbon or some, you see some of these in like flight cases and protective cases where there's raised sections on the sides, on the bottom, on top. These like little bits of raised sections. Also places where you can pick them up on the side. And also separation between lid and bottom. So what I'm going to do first of all is make these sections at the top and sections at the bottom. So how am I going to do that? Well, I need to create an area to actually make these shapes from. I need to make like a little zone. So I know that I'm going to, if this is symmetrical, I'm going to have a little kind of like raised section across here and then one across here as well. And then I'm going to have 2 similar ones down at the bottom. So like little resting places for at the bottom. So how do I do that? Like I said, I need to make those sections, just like with this, how I made these sections here. So I dictated this top section and I dictated this bottom section. I do the same thing with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select around the front like this, because you cut perpendicular to these edges. So if I select these edges going across horizontal like this, it means I'm going to be putting edges going in this direction. So I'm going to add mesh tool connect, and I'm just going to bring up that tool setting. Remember, your tool settings are up here on top right. I'm just going to click reset tool. So reset tool is just going to make everything reset, obviously. Boop, like that. So I want to add 2 segments, because these first 2 ones, and this is kind of getting into like beginner intermediate modeling. I want to make this footprint, like I said. I want to make this little zone that I know I can extrude from. So these 2 edges I'm adding in first are going to be the furthest outside edges. So I can use pinch now just to move them out. So how far do I want these little kind of raised sections to come out, come away from the edge? So I'm going to say maybe about there. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. For the again, for the exact same position like that. Mesh tools, connect, and then use pinch to decide how thick. So these are now my inside ones, but here I can decide how thick these little protective ridges are going to be. So I want these to be pretty thick, so I'm going to somewhere around there. There we go. So now I've set up this little zone here and here to extrude from, and I got obviously the same thing at the bottom. But now I'm thinking, do I want the extrusions? Because if I do that here, the extrusion is going to come all the way to the edge, like here. Do I want that bit of extrusion to come all the way to the edge, or do I want to have that curve and then a bit of a flat break and then this kind of extrusion? Well, I kind of want a little bit of a break. I want to give myself a bit of a gap from this edge here to where this new kind of form begins. So I'll do the exact same thing, but instead of going across here, I'm going to go across here. So in edge mode again, because I'm just going to use the exact same tools. Select all down the middle, and notice how I'm moving my camera, so when I'm selecting stuff, I'm not accidentally selecting stuff I don't want. I'm just selecting down the middle at the thin strip, like that. Mesh tools, connect, and then it's pinch, and then I can just move that out to be the very, very outside of where I want that to be. So like there. Brilliant. And now it's time for me to actually extrude these bits out. So I'm going to do them all at the same time as well. I'm going to grab all 4 of them. Extrude. And then I'm going to bring them up a little bit. And then just move the offset in a tiny bit. Just like that. That's all I'm going to do for them. Very, very, like I said, I'm going to keep this very, very simple. So you can see I've got a top and a bottom. And I can go around, I can do that through all the different other segments and sections. Of course, I've got those 2 little bits at the top and the bottom, bit of protection. Now I'm going to make the separation between a lid and a base. Is this going to be something which is split equally down the middle? Or is this something where I'm going to have like a third at the bottom, 2/3 at the top, or 2/3 at the bottom, 1/3 at the top? I'm going to use just the connect tool again. So I'm going to select through the middle to make sure I've only got those middle edges selected. Because again, this time I'm going to be cutting across. So I'm going to be selecting the vertical edges. Mesh tools, connect. Make it one segment. But so by default, the tool will increase and decrease. You have to go to the tool settings here to choose if you want to do slide or pinch. So I'm going to add one segment in the middle. Confirm that. So press W to confirm. And then I'm just going to move this up or down to depending where I want this to be. Now I want this to be about there. Yeah, about there. So that's my separation, which is nice. Okay, so thinking about the design of the object, do I want this to be a kind of crate which will kind of see like this? So everything kind of goes inwards on the side like this? Or do I want this to be a crate which is more like... Oh, don't know why you're doing that. Oh, because I've done a thing. That's why. There you go. There you go. Or something like that, where this is more like there's a metal sealant between the 2 pieces. So again, this is oops, I keep moving that. So again, this is what you can decide. I'm going to have this metal sealant kind of section there. So as you can see, that was very, very easy for me to do. I just had that selected, that edge. Just double clicked it to select the edge going around. That's all I've done there. I'm just going to hit bevel. That is going to split that one edge into 2. And I just use that fraction to get the right kind of height of this. Now I'm going to do a trick with this. I'm going to make a bit of a visual trick. I'm going to make it look like they're actually physically split away from each other, when really it's still one physical bit of geometry. So that's going to be the height of both the lid and the bottom sections connected. So I'm happy with that, and then I'm just going to shift and then click, hold shift and then double click in the direction I want to select. So I'm going to select round like that. So you can see it goes round. Extrude, and then I'm going to nudge this out. It's only a little bit of nudge, just a little bit like that. And I'm going to use the offset just to bring that in a smidge as well. Take away that hard right angle edge, just like that. So now you can see I've got that kind of lid sealant section, which is nice. Well, like I said, what I'm going to do is make it look like you've got a top section of that and a bottom section of this. And this is very, very easy. Literally, I've just done it. I'm just going to do that whole process in a smaller area. So I'm going to add an edge going around this section here. So click this, hold shift, double click in that direction so I can go all the way around. Mesh tools, connect, add one in the middle there. I'm just going to add two this time. Again, bring my pinch in. And in fact, because I know that I'm going to be adding an edge in the middle, I'm going to add 3 segments, because what I want to have is, basically, there we go, I'm going to have a flat face here, which is going to be connected to this bottom section, and then a flat face here, which is going to be the top section. And then I need 2 edges here, which is going to allow me to actually make this indentation I'm going to make. Just like here where we've got this flat edge, then this edge here helps me bring out this little lip. I'm going to have something like that. So I've made those 3 edges in there. Just by using the mesh tools connect, going into the option, the tools for it, and changing some of the tools. And then I'm going to just carefully zoom in, double click the center line there, that center edge, and then I'm going to use the scale tool to first of all slightly scale in a little bit there, like that. So just a nudge, and then I'm going to use the Z axis to do the same thing on this axis. Just a nudge there. There you go. So what that allows me to do, if I go in there and do the whole harden edge trick, is I can get the impression of 2 bits of geometry, 2 lids. Like that. And now that I've got that geometry in there, I've got that idea in there, I can change it. So what if I want to have this top lip section be taller or thinner? What do I want this one? So if I grab all the faces going around here, for instance, hold shift double click in that direction, and I can move that down a bit, then I can make it look a little bit asymmetrical. So this has got a heavier support, for instance, than this. Or maybe I'd thought, oh, you know, that now that I've put all that information in, maybe everything looks a little bit too thin, you know. Cool. So what have we actually used to do that? To do this so far, to get to this point? Well, we've used, obviously, creating a cube. We've created all the edges at first, getting the softer edges in there with the bevel. And then we've used the mesh connect to create basically the sections where we can then extrude these bits from. And then extrusion. And then basically just riffed on that. So use the mesh tools connect to create the top and the bottom of this little section. Then extrude to pull it out. Then use the mesh connection again to create this split of 3 in the middle to make this little indentation. So it's the same thing used over and over and over again. It's very, very cool. So now what I'm going to do is make some handholds. We've not got handholds here. Now what I'm not going to do is start adding edges going across here. I could do, but I'm going to be a little bit cheap and cheeky with this one, because I know I'm not going to do much on this small section here, but I do want like an interior hand section here, and also on the other side. So what I'm going to do is just select this face and also select this one at the same time, because if this object is symmetrical, then I should be able to do both of these at the same time. So I'm just going to hide both of them for now. So make sure I've got both of these selected, both sides, because when I do the extrusions and stuff now, it's now that these have been actually physically separated, there's no connecting faces. They're going to treat themselves as individual faces. So what I'm going to do is extrude. I'm going to do the offset. Oh, not division, sorry. Offset, there we go. So turn divisions down to bring that in a little bit. Now this isn't, the tools that we've got here aren't going to, we can add other tools to it, but we're going to keep it simple for now. All I'm going to do at first is just get the general offset. I can do a lot more of this manually in a bit, but I'm going to get the general offset to get the width, like that, and then I'm just going to go to my normal tool. So I'm pressing W there. I can move them up, and again, because both are still selected, and I'm only using the arrows to move them up, not the actual center, remember, I'm not using the center, I'm just using the arrow in the direction I want to move it. I move it up like that, and then I can use the scale tool just to use the x-axis just to bring it in a little bit. Maybe use the scale axis just to make it a bit taller, like that. And then I'm going to use extrude again, and I'm going to add the thickness this time. Now here's where I'm going to go a little bit more AAA level object, because I want to make sure it looks like a hand can get inside to grip it. So I want to make sure that it looks like there's a bit of a void behind here. So I've done this little bit of a first extrusion just to get the thickness of this grip. But I'm going to extrude again, like that. And then all I'm going to do is just lift it up, like that. And now it looks like you've got a handhold section on the inside, something to grip your crate with. Very, very simple, like I said, super, super simple. I'm not overcomplicating it too much. Now I'm going to do something a little bit crazy with this actually. I'm going to give myself a security panel. And this will actually have me using some new tools. Still part of the big five, but ones we've not touched just yet. I want a security panel right here. Something where someone would have to input a code. And I want a flat surface, and I kind of like the idea of the flat surface being an angle, like a 45-degree angle here. So I've got to think about, where do I want it, what's the shape, what's the form that I want. Well, I want it here, and what geometry have I got that I could use at this point? Well, I've got this edge running across here, which is in line with obviously these two little raised sections, so I could use this. And I could bring it down to about halfway down here. So there's a little bit of a gap from this, then the panel would start around here. Okay. And then the width, I'd want about half this distance, I reckon. So about half this width. So what is this? This is just using the connect tool again. So first of all, I want to have that edge going across here in this direction. Like that. Just the one edge for this. And I'm going to just like that. Simple, good. And then I'm going to, so remember, these quick selections I'm making, it's just I'm clicking the edge and I'm shift double clicking the edge in the direction I want to go. So because I want it going all the way around, I'm doing that. Because I want an edge to go all the way around. The way you create n-gons commonly is by not having, like just having this, for instance. If I just go from here to here and then I add an edge in, then I've made an n-gon here because I've got a 5-sided shape, because this is now splitting this one side, this one edged face into two. And same here, now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because of this. So to keep things nice and simple at first, we're not doing any proper optimization just yet. I'm just going to make sure I go all the way around. I'm going to add 2, and then I'm just going to scale those out, and then I can use the scale just to dictate how wide that's going to be. So I'm going to say about there. Boom, like that. Now here comes the crazy bit. I'm going to delete these faces. I'm going to get rid of them. So I've gone into face mode, hold right click, go to face, select the faces I want to get rid of, and then just hit delete to get rid of them, like that. Very, very cool, very, very simple. Now what I'm going to do is bridge back a face to get it nice and flat. So from this top edge here to this edge here, I'm going to bridge like that. So you can see the shape that makes, which is nice. Now there's an issue that I need to think about here. There's a problem I need to solve, and that's that I've got one edge here on both sides, but then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges across here on both sides. So I need to make sure that I'm not using too many triangles, that I've got as many quads as possible, and that I've got no n-gons. How am I going to do that? How can I solve that? It's very, very simple. When you get to know this kind of stuff, it's very, very simple. Number one, I got to ignore these edges. The edges that are connected to this face, so right here you got a face here, I got an edge here, and then right next to it you got an edge here, and you got an edge here. Ignore those. Ignore those edges. That's basically, on a normal quad, it's these two edges if they were connected to this. We can ignore those. It's what's going on after it. So right there we've got 1, 2, 3 edges right here. 1, 2, 3. So what I'm going to do, to just be quick and dirty, I'm going to send 3 edges going across the middle of this. So I can actually just start to fill this up, start to re-bridge this area. So from going from this part to this part, I'm just going to connect, add 3. In fact, I'm going to just reset the tool, add 3. There we go. So I'm adding 3 sections there. And then I should just be able to bridge these back, because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 edges here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 edges here. Okay, so from this point, again, I'm ignoring this edge here, but from here to here, I can bridge. And then from there to there, I can bridge. And then from there to there, I can bridge. And then from there to there, I can bridge. Boom. Sealed up. And then I can do the other thing, the same on the other side. And in fact, if you know where you're bridging, you can do things in bulk. So I know I'm going to bridge from these 4 to here. And Maya's clever enough to bridge it like that. So you can see there, I'm able to make some quite nice, complex shapes. So now I'm gonna start finishes, and obviously, you know, if you're doing something like this, you could add more, you know, little raised protective little sections and stuff like that. But I'm gonna end this just by doing one pass of beveling before I actually finish off, and that's because I've gone through and made corners at the beginning smooth to make it look like a bit like Peli case kind of flight case thing. But some of the stuff I've done looks a bit hard. Obviously, these 2 bits on top and these 2 bits on bottom, I've got these very sharp right angles. This new section for the keypad section has got a very, very sharp right angle. I want to get rid of some of this, but this is where some of the problems would come from more kind of inexperienced modelers, is you might just bevel them and think, okay, I'm done. It's not the case. When you're beveling stuff, you've got to be careful about how you're beveling or what you're beveling and what is actually happening with that. Is it creating n-gons? You know, if I bevel something, what's happening to the surrounding areas? For instance, if I was to bevel this area, which I'm going to do in a bit, but when I bevel this, what does that do? We can see there it's made a load of n-gons. It's made an n-gon here, an n-gon here, an n-gon here, and an n-gon here. That's a lot of mess. And if I do that across all 4 sides, it's going to create a lot of mess. And then what happens if I start to increase subdivisions like that? Again, it starts making messes. So when I'm doing stuff like that, again, it's fine to make n-gons, but you've got to fix them. And that's just on a single edge on like a corner here. What if I get something like this where I've got different angles? So I've got a plane wrapping around in this direction. This is a plane. And then I got a plane here. And then I got a plane here. And then I got a plane here. So I've got all these different planes that are intersecting each other. So if I was to say bevel across this edge here, what's happening? What's going on? You know, is it creating any horrible shapes? Do I need to fix anything? You know, I've got to be aware of what I'm doing all the time. You know. So that's actually an easy one. You can see then, if I just do one edge like this on its own, if I just do this, I start creating n-gons all over the shop. Starts making horrible things. But if I go around and do a complete loop, so I go all the way around the object, it actually fixes it. It doesn't actually create any n-gons because it's a continuous selection. It's not like the selection just ends abruptly on 2 sides. It's a continuous selection. So that's one way I can actually fix it. So I'm going to go around and now select all the edges I'm going to bevel and then fix up using the target world some of those issues. So this might take a bit of time, but it's fine. So I'm going to carefully just go around and select all the edges that I want to bevel. So that one, 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 and then the top as well. So that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. And it's good to do these to do sections in bulk. I'm not going to do everything in one go, but I'm going to do lots of similar things in one go. So at the bottom as well, do the same thing. So like that. And I'm thinking, do I even want to bevel these bottom bits here? So let's just see what it looks like. Let's do an experimentation. See what it looks like when I do the bottom bit here as well. Okay, looks okay. What happens if I don't do that? What happens if I just do this? Okay, so either or is an okay decision. I think what I'm going to do is actually bevel the bottom of each one of these as well. And this is a good idea, like I said, to do things in chunks and not all at the same time. So I'm just... Ooh, I've accidentally deleted a face there by accident. I'm just doing these sections because they're all connected to each other. They're all, you know, similar to each other. So one change for one is going to obviously affect the rest. Cool. Right, so let's bevel. Okay. Thing 4. I'm not going to add any segments to this because I don't think you feel they need them. But what's happening? Okay, we've got end guns here. So we've got a 5-sided shape right here. Same thing here. Same thing here. Same thing here. So I can probably say that we're going to have the same end gun issue on each one of these corners, top and bottom. That's cool. That's fine. Okay. So then let's do this little section here like we just did before. I'm going to select all the way around to make a complete selection, a loop, like that, and I'm going to bevel. And maybe here I am going to add a segment, one segment just in there, because it feels like an important area where, you know, the audience is, maybe the camera zooms in when they're dealing with it. So I want to have this be a little bit smoother, but that I'm happy with. It's looking good. And then inside here, maybe just bevel some of this. So maybe if I'm going super sci-fi, maybe these all have very round corners at the bottom. So get that. I'll do something more like that. Okay, I like that. That's looking alright. But then, again, we are making those end guns. And I think I'm just going to do the same up here as well. I am going to go back and fix that missing face in a sec. The way I fix that missing face is literally just doing a bridge from one side to the other. Very simple. Okay. I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so now I've got these softer, rounder edges around there. This is cool. So let's just fix this dead fast. How do I fix this? Very simple. All I've got to do is bridge, like that. So select the two edges and then hit bridge, which is our little shape there, and we're all good. So let's go through, before we actually finish, and fix up some of those end guns that we've made. So the big ones I'm going to fix first. So these ones, there's 8 of these I need to fix. 2 on this side, 4 on this side, 4 on the other side. So here's where I need to go into vertex mode, because we're dealing with vertexes now. To weld vertexes, we're dealing with vertexes. So hold right click, go to vertex. I'm just going to click off, just make sure that I'm not selected anything that I don't want. And then I'm going to just use target weld, which is this little icon here. It's like a frame. And just drag that into the corner like that. Drag that into the corner like that. Drag this into the corner. Drag this into the corner. Same on the other side. Drag it into the corner. 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 Boom. Fixed. So they're very, very, very easily fixed. Now, what's going on down here? What can we do down here? Here's where we can actually do a little bit of optimization to actually fix some of this up. So when we added in these edges coming round here to make the these little raised sections here, we've manually added in those edges, but we can actually get rid of them not to destroy the shape, but to, one, help us fix our n-gons, but two, to also help us quote unquote optimize a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, and this is the kind of this is the n-gon we're talking about here, because obviously we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this little dude makes it 5. So what I'm going to do is, again, using target world, make sure I've not got anything selected. Using target world there. So for instance, I'm using this area here as a reference piece, an example. So I'm going to take this edge right here, I'm going to drag it in like that. That now turns that 5-sided shape, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we get rid of this edge, it turns it into a 4-sided shape. And if I do the same on the bottom, basically its lower counterpart, do the exact same thing. Like that, we do that. And then all I've got to do is get rid of this edges in the middle, which is dead simple. I'm not going to use target weld for this. I could do. I could painstakingly go through and target weld each one of these into the center here. But what I could also do is just make sure I've got all that length selected. Control backspace. Not delete, because if I hit delete, it leaves vertexes behind, which is what we don't want. We don't want to leave vertexes behind. It's a bad time. So whenever we delete edges, it don't matter if it's faces and vertexes, but when we delete edges, we want to hit Control backspace. Now I'm just not arbitrarily deleting an edge there as well. I've set up that little bit of a scaffold there. I've set up this going into the corner, so it gives me a nice shelf to work on. Gives me a nice scaffold. And if I do the same thing here, so I'll go target weld here to here, and then here to here, then do the same thing. So I can grab that little length, Control backspace, boom, gone. Start getting a lot easier. Start getting a lot nicer now. So what I'm going to do is go around and do the exact same thing on all of them. And in fact, I might even, well, probably, I'll show you how we can even take it a little bit further. But what I'm doing here is basically, you know, a nice even level of optimization, but we can go deeper with the optimization if we want. So I'll bring that there. Like there. So boom. Really nice. And then I do the same thing on the front, obviously. But the next level of optimization I might want to do is looking at these here. This edge here. Now, this might not actually work good for me, or it might look great for me. I don't know just yet. So, if I go to edge mode again, I'm going to target weld these two geezers into these two. So, grab this, move you down there, and then move you down there. What that's making is a small little triangle here. But what I've got to be careful of is if that is going to cause a bit of a weird shape. You might get these like little triangle, or even on a flat surface, these little triangles appearing, like little sharp triangles might appear. So I've just got to be aware of that. Now I can't see one here. It should be here, but I can't see it. So that's looking like a success story there. So that's another level of optimization I can do. It's just taking away a lot of these scaffolding edges, all these edges here, and carefully getting rid of what we can. Now I don't necessarily need to do that for everything, but it's just good to go through and see if we can do that. But you can, like I said in class, you can over-optimize, where you get rid of too many edges. You over-optimize, it makes the skeleton weak, it makes the object weak, and sometimes that's where you get like bad geometry and stuff. But I'll go through and fix the ones at the front here. Now here, because we've got this little section that we took out before, this might not necessarily work the same way, but we'll just check. We'll just have a go. So back to vertex mode, and then we'll fix these at the corner here. So I'm gonna where you connect to? Yeah, I'll drag you in. So I'll take you to the corner, down to the bottom, you to the corner. Same the other side. Take you to the corner. Take you to the corner. And then I'm going to grab you to the corner, grab you to the corner, grab you to the corner, and then drag you. So you can see here I'm doing like big optimization point, and then I'm going to clean up what's left. So all that section, get rid of you. All that section, get rid of you. Oops, so that one is actually running on. Oh, because we've not fixed that one yet, have we? Because I've missed that one off for some reason. Like a fool. So put that into the corner. There we go. Right. Just like that. And then, yeah, there you go. Nice. So we've done a bit of optimization there, just to get rid of some of those edges. Now, optimization is something that comes with time and knowledge and understanding of this. It's not just about willy-nilly getting rid of arbitrary edges. You've got to know why you're getting rid of edges, the impact it's going to have on the mesh. Is that optimization, like I said, actually going to give you some negative geometry, going to give you some bad kind of outputs, some outcomes, or can you actually get rid of something? So for instance, I'm contemplating getting rid of these edges here, but I feel like it might give me some horrible like little artifact, and like you can see here, that's them little triangles I'm talking about. And that's because we've got a lot of these kind of massed in one area. But that's fine, I've got ways of fixing that. But that was a longer way of doing it, that's a longer kind of model. But here I can go around and just do that harden edge thing just to bring back some of those more important details. Alright, like that. Like that. Maybe with this one I might even bevel around there. Yep, like that. There you go. So pretty much, besides the bridge, everything we use there is what we've used before. It's just how you use it. So we go from something very, very simple, like this, where it's a perfect cube, and we're just using the extrusion with keep faces together turned off to make all the different faces the same. And then we're using the exact same methodology, the exact same thinking to make something a bit more complex. But still very simple, because it's still, you know, it's pretty much symmetrical going around here. It's just got like one kind of forward axis. It's just using bevel and an extrusion and adding edges in there. So where this one is just extrusion, this one is bevel, extrusion, and add edges. This one is bevel, add edges, extrude, and bridge. And it's just steps up in complexity, but you know, we've still got the same, each one of them still got the exact same landmark. So here you've got the little spout at the top. This one's got the little hand. I've just realised I've not beveled that face. This one's got the little handholds here. This one's got insets there. They were just using extrusion. We've made those the exact same way. With these two, we've got things that actually come proud of the surface, come out of the surface. We've got a little mouthpiece here. And then we've got little raised sections here. Easy. You know, we're adding in edges on these two to differentiate between different regions. So in this case, we use the edges to set up this little section here for this, like a metal protective ring around the lids. We use bevel to soften the edge here. We use bevel to soften the edge here. You know, so it's a lot of the same thing. We just build on complexity as we go along. And admittedly, sci-fi stuff is easier to make because it's generally, if we go for like industrial or militaristic kind of sci-fi stuff, then it's all very quite easy to make because it's all meant to be, you know, stored away, kept in, you know, in stacks and stuff. It's not meant to be weirdly shaped. The older you go in time, the more things get wobblier and more unique shape, to the point where, you know, you go into, you know, caveman times where you're making clubs, and you know, every club's got to look a little bit different kind of thing, because they should do, within reason. And then modern day, you know, a glass is a glass. You make one glass, you've made 100 glasses. You made one cup, you've made 100 mugs. That kind of stuff. So very, very simple. We're not going to look at doing any kind of UVing in this. This is just about cube modeling. Simple processes, simple shapes. So each one of these can absolutely go into a game engine now, and these are probably perfectly game ready. You know, outside of UVing and texturing, these are all ready for a game engine. And I guarantee you look around your desk, you look around your house, your flat, you wherever, you'll find things like this everywhere. You've just got to start to try and look at things like extrusions and insets and bevels. Bevel is not a modeling term, by the way. Bevel, well, it's not a 3D CGI modeling term. Bevel is a term used across CGI, across woodworking, across any kind of industry that makes a thing. You'll have a bevel. A bevel is an old-fashioned term. So you'll find bevels on chairs. You'll find bevel on houses. You'll find bevels desks. You'll find bevels on foodstuffs. You know, insets, things that stick out. If anyone has anyone who's really into like who knows a musician who plays live a lot, you might see that some of their equipment is in a box like this. Or if you know someone who has some like very high end photography equipment, you might see boxes like this. The Cintiq cases that we've been using at school, they're in one of these. Look at that Cintiq case. It's just this. The only things we've not gone in here yet is things like the hinges at the back or some sort of like locking mechanism at the front. I could probably do a better job with the handhold sections there. There's no little section here to help it. Like we've got these bits at the top. There's no section down here. These are in line with this here. So if we were to stack these two things on top of each other, it wouldn't be the most jigsaw-y economic way of doing it. But these are just simple stuff. Simple. And this is what I want us to do, is just experiment with stuff. Look at a thing, try and make it. Start off with something as simple as this. This is not hard to make. This is two functions. In fact, I'll do it again. Full speed. Cube. Extrude. Key faces off. Bring it in. Extrude. Bring it in. Done. Less than a minute. Less than 30 seconds. Because what is it? It's just using extrude. That's all it's doing. Extrude, offset, extrude, in. And then we just expand on from then. We just expand on with bevels. We expand on with bridging. We expand on with adding edges. And I bring this back again. You've really got to think about like look at the world around you and pay attention to things aren't made of one material most time. This is made up of metal casing, a plastic top, and a plastic bottom. So as a modeler, I want to separate those off. I want to have, even if I'm not going to have like a geometric separation, like there's going to be like a noticeable step, a geometric step, I might just put in those, like I've done there. I'm just going to put in those here, so I can actually physically split in the UV. I can split off my plastic bit. I can split off my metal bit, so that my textures don't bleed over into each other, so that I've got a clear separation between one material to another. With more advanced modeling, you might have completely separate materials, where this is going to be in one material. You might have like completely different materials that you take from like a library from your studio. You got a library of leather, you got a library of metal, you got a library of wood. You take that wood texture, you apply it to that, but then you need that geometric separation to have a separate material in that section. I can't tell a material to only go up to this point here, because I can't do that. I've got to have some way of separating it off. Yes, in TV and film you can do, and maybe in previs you can, but when we're talking about actually putting something into a game engine, giving it the least amount of work to do. This is a very, very simple object, so why should this take up more data than it really should? If I can use this very cheap geometry to make the engine's life easier, that's what I'm going to do. That's my job. And like I said, you go around games, you go around especially sci-fi games, walk around any environment, and you'll just see loads of stuff. Loads of small, simple stuff. Not everything in the world of games is about making the big bad monster. It's about making the big robot. It's about making the big environment. A lot of times it's about making the small things to then make the big things look better later on. Cool. So we're about an hour and a half now, so I'm going to end the video there. This is a long video. All the videos are kind of going to be about this range. But, practice. This is what we're going to be going over in class a lot. We're looking at how you basically do these things, and then how do you then make them more complex and make them more interesting. Not to say that the crate is boring, but obviously I think a lot of people are going to go, oh, it's a crate, it's boring. It's not. When you really get into texturing and stuff, it gets really, really fun. Cool, so I'll end it there.